The IMM 5373E is the Sponsorship Undertaking and Settlement Plan form that is used by sponsorship agreement holders. This video tutorial is specifically geared towards how to complete this form for sponsorship agreement holders who are following Risk Management Plan B or C. When you open up the form, you know that you are opening the fillable version of the form because you can see these buttons at the top: Save, Reset, and Print Form. As you go along completing this form, if you need to stop midway through filling in the information, you can click on the Save button, which will save it to your computer, and you can reopen it again at another time. So to begin with, you'll need to check this box here if you're doing a blended visa office referred program sponsorship, and if you're not, you will leave it blank. If you are doing a sponsorship in connection with the Rainbow Refugee Assistance Partnership, then you would check this box here. When you check the box for the blended visa office referred sponsorship, you have additional information to include, such as the profile number for that BVOR sponsorship. If you've made a mistake by checking one of these boxes, you can undo your selection. Or if you don't want to see this undo selection, you can click on the button to reset the form. So moving on to section A, the sponsor information. This is where you will fill in information about your organization. So the first line, you're going to fill in the legal name of your sponsorship agreement holder organization. This would be the name that was placed into the SAW agreement that you had signed. Next, you will include the address information, so the number and street, city, province, postal code for where the sponsorship agreement holder's main office is located. You will also include the primary telephone number that is used for your sponsorship agreement holder organization's sponsorship program. You will also include the primary email address that is used by your SAW for correspondence with IRCC. You also include the name of the SAHs signing authority, the person who can act on behalf of the organization and bind them to this contract, this undertaking form. Now, the SAW signing authority had to have been identified to IRCC, and that name is kept on file with IRCC. So this would need to be someone who IRCC is aware of, that you have authorized to be a signing authority for your SAW. Next, when you scroll down, you're going to find information about constituent groups or co-sponsors you may have. If you don't work with a constituent group or a co-sponsor, you can select no for do you have a constituent group or do you have a co-sponsor, and then continue on filling in the rest of the form. However, if you do have a constituent group, you would select yes, and some additional information will be required from you about the organization. So the name of the constituent group will need to be inserted, as well as the authorized signing authority, again, the person who has the authority to bind that organization to a contract. You would provide their information here, as well as their date of birth and the address information for where that constituent group organization is located. You would also need to include the telephone number and email address for that constituent group that is used in connection with the private sponsorship that they are going to be undertaking. Next, we will choose yes if you do have a co-sponsor, and co-sponsors can take the form of two different types. You would select which type of sponsor you are working with. It is a co-sponsoring individual or a co-sponsoring organization. Now, if you had selected at the top that you are undertaking a Rainbow Refugee partnership, then you would need to select Rainbow Refugee Partnership Organization. In this case, we're going to select the type of sponsor as a co-sponsoring individual. When it's a co-sponsoring individual, you would need to include their family name and given name, their date of birth, as well as their unique client identification number if they had had any interactions, applications with IRCC previously. They would know if they have a unique client identification number, a UCI number. You would also include any information about the relationship to the principal applicant. So if they are family members of the principal applicant, you would indicate how they are related. We also need to know the address information, apartment or unit number, city, province, and postal code, their home telephone number, if they have a cell telephone number, as well as their email address. Now, if you include more than one co-sponsor, you will need to ensure that each of those co-sponsors has separate email addresses. You can't use the same email address for the co-sponsors, and you can't use the same email address as the constituent group if you also have a constituent group. Now, if you have a co-sponsoring organization, this is what you can expect to see. You will need to provide the name of the co-sponsoring organization, so their legal name, as well as the name of their signing authority and that signing authority's date of birth. You also include the unique client identification number for that signing authority or organization if they had had any applications submitted with IRCC previously. And you would also need to indicate the relationship to the principal applicant if it's applicable. This organization may have no relationship to the principal applicant, so you can put NA if it is not applicable. You also need to provide the address of the organization where that organization is located. We'll also need to provide the organization's primary telephone number and primary email address. Moving on to Section B, information about the refugee applicants. So you want to provide information about both the accompanying and non-accompanying family members. And you can refer to the Guide for Sponsorship Agreement Holders to Privately Sponsor Refugees, which is IMM 5413, to understand the definition of family members. So who you will need to include as a refugee applicant on this particular undertaking. So you will need to include the information about the principal applicant here, their family name and given names, as well as their gender, date of birth, their place and country or territory of birth, their marital status, citizenship, and if they have dual citizenship, you would indicate the other citizenship as well. If you are only sponsoring a single individual who is unmarried, and if they don't have any children, then you would select no, you do not have additional family members to add. However, if this individual is married and or they have any children, you would select yes. When you do so, you will need to provide information about those additional family members. So for example, if they are married, then you will first indicate the information about their spouse. So include the spouse's family name, given name, their gender, date of birth, the place and country or territory of that spouse's birth, and then the spouse's marital status, their relationship to the principal applicant, their citizenship, and you will indicate whether they will accompany or not accompany the principal applicant to Canada. So this question generally means will they intend to arrive in Canada at the same time and have their application processed at the same time as the principal applicant? If it's not possible because that spouse is located in a country where it makes it difficult for them to leave or be processed at the same time as the principal applicant, then they would likely select non-accompanying. And this means that they will have an opportunity at a later date to come to Canada, perhaps under the 1-year window of opportunity program. Now, when it comes to non-accompanying individuals, you do need to include those persons who are presumed missing or dead. And you also need to include any children of the principal applicant or the principal applicant's spouse, whether or not they live with those parents. Perhaps they are from a previous marriage. You would still need to include those children's information in this application. And the reason you need to include them is because
the Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulations
has a lifetime bar currently against bringing any dependents to Canada who were not named on the principal applicant's undertaking when they were sponsored to come to Canada. And so to ensure that those family members have every opportunity to join their parent in Canada at a later date or their spouse in Canada at a later date, you absolutely need to include them on this application. Now, if you have more than one dependent to be added to the application, you would select Add Additional Family Member. And now you can scroll down. After the spouse's information, you would include information about the dependent children as well. Scrolling down further, when you have multiple undertaking applications for a single family unit, where you have, for example, children who are married and have a separate undertaking, or perhaps a brother wants to be processed at the same time as his married brother, then you can link those applications together here as well. And if you need more than one application to be linked, then you would select Add Application. Now, under Section C, this is the information about the sponsorship undertaking. You would need to read through all of these to understand what you're agreeing to when you sign this undertaking to sponsor. In particular, you're declaring that the information provided is, to the best of your knowledge, true, complete, and accurate, and that you're not in default of any other sponsorship undertakings or any immigration loans. And there's quite a bit of information to read. Make sure you understand everything that you are agreeing to and that you are consenting to. This section here, in particular, explains what the consequences are for not doing what you agreed to do. Now, under Section D, the settlement plan, because you are a SAW that is following Risk Management Plan B or C, you're going to need to select the appropriate option here. We're going to start with Plan B. So for SAHs following Plan B, you would scroll down to complete your settlement needs checklist. So you're going to identify who's going to be responsible for providing each settlement need by checking the relevant box. And so by checking each box, the sponsoring group is confirming that they will provide for the settlement needs of the refugees within or before the stated time period and based on their individual circumstances. And all the settlement needs must be provided for in accordance with this new document that has been released by IRCC in November of 2023. It's called the Post-Arrival Support Requirements for Private Sponsorships. So to find out what that document includes, you'll need to read the information, and you can click on this. It is a link that will take you to that document to find out more about what your post-arrival support requirements are for private sponsorship. You will also want to refer to the Guide for Sponsorship Agreement Holders to Privately Sponsored Refugees, the IMM 5413 Instruction Guide, to learn about what your responsibilities are and how to fill out the forms. So you have the responsibilities that you will need to ensure occur. And so you'll need to indicate whether it's going to be the sponsorship agreement holder, the constituent group, the co-sponsors, or whether it's not applicable. Or it could be a combination of any of these groups. So you could have all three of them being responsible, or you may choose to remove the sponsorship agreement holder, and it's the responsibility of the constituent group and co-sponsors. Or it may just be a responsibility of the co-sponsors. But keep in mind that regardless of what you check mark here, whether you include the SAW or not, the SAW is ultimately responsible for each of these activities in the event that your constituent group or any co-sponsors you're working with fail to meet that obligation. Now, the only time you would select not applicable is when it is an activity that does not relate to this specific refugee family or refugee that you're sponsoring. So for example, if this particular case does not have any school-age children, then of course that option would be chosen as not applicable. And when you select not applicable, there is a drop-down box that is asking you why this particular activity is not applicable to this case. Now you'll notice that you have a timeline of activities to complete. And so you'll start out with what needs to be done over the duration of the sponsorship period. What are ongoing tasks that need to be done regularly? And when you receive the notice of arrival transmission. And then at the time of arrival and within the first 3 weeks, these are the activities that you need to assign persons to. And scrolling down, you have activities that need to be assigned for months 1 through 3 after the arrival of the refugees, as well as during months 4 through 6, 7 through 9, 10 through 12. And while these are specific activities that are listed, it is not a complete list of what needs to be done for the sponsorship. It's a key list of things that need to be done, but there are going to be additional things that may be unique and specific to these particular refugees you're sponsoring. Now, scrolling down, you will have a financial needs checklist. And in the financial needs checklist, we have financial needs that are divided into 2 categories. You have the one-time startup costs, and you also have ongoing monthly costs. And so you will need to indicate the kinds of things that will be provided. And so again, when you're completing this section, you always want to refer to the post-arrival support requirements for private sponsorship. It gives you all the information you need to know when you're talking about the financial commitment, the financial needs. And you will also refer to Appendix A of the Guide for Sponsorship Agreement Holders to Privately Sponsored Refugees. So that's the instruction guide, IMM 5413. And that Appendix A is specifically providing information about your financial requirements. And so you're going to check mark all of the things that you will be providing under one-time startup costs, as well as the basic needs, shelter, transportation, and communication. Now, none of these are optional. You do need to check mark that you are providing these things. These are mandatory items that you will need to provide. And scrolling down to Section E, you will be signing that you as the sponsorship group confirm your intention to provide financial and non-financial support to the sponsored refugees. And you agree to provide those supports in accordance with the post-arrival support requirements document And you consent to IRCC providing your contact information to the government-funded Refugee Sponsorship Training Program, RSTP, for the purpose of receiving information and training on settlement planning. That way you can prepare well for the arrival of the refugees you have applied to sponsor. So you're going to have the SAW signing authority, insert the name here, and then if you are working with a constituent group, you would indicate the signing authority name for the constituent group, as well as any co-sponsors' names that you are working with. When it comes to the signature block, IRCC is allowing digital signatures. And so to provide a digital signature simply means that that individual themselves needs to type their name underneath the signature block. And they will date when they sign their name. Now, typically you will want the date of their signature to be the same date as when you are submitting their application. And so the same goes for the constituent group signing authority. That individual will need to type their own name in the signature block, which represents their digital signature. And the same goes for the co-sponsor. You may choose to still have the signing authorities use a pen to sign their name. That's perfectly acceptable. So in this case, you would leave the signature blocks blank and you would print the form out, have those individuals sign in pen if that is your preference, and then you will scan the form back into an electronic version to send to IRCC via the Permanent Residence Portal. Scrolling down, this last bit of information is just so you understand how IRCC will use the information provided in this form.
When you are finished completing and signing this form, you're going to scroll to the top of the page until you can see the Print Form button. You'll click on that to save a PDF version of your form in a flattened version, which can no longer be edited. To do this, you're going to select from your printer options, Microsoft Print to PDF. Once you select that and click Print, you will have a PDF version that can no longer be edited.